I'm Councillor Brant, and I'm a Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care on Liverpool City Council, former Deputy Mayor on the Council, and been a councillor since I was 24, almost uninterrupted. Well, we meet in probably the most spectacularly turbulent political times I can remember in the whole of my life. Some of you will be familiar with the Chinese curse of "May you live in interesting times." Well, Theresa May is living in interesting times right at the moment. We have a government that for the first time ever has been, or an government which has been determined by Parliament to be in contempt of Parliament. We have fault lines running within parties, not necessarily just between parties. We have institutions of governance being attacked by the media, enemies of the people, of our judges. These are astonishingly turbulent times. We have a situation where, because of the votes in Parliament in the last few days, the prospect of a very hard Brexit is gradually beginning to recede. And you're seeing at the same time the mask beginning to slip from some of the Brexit snake oil salesmen in the House of Commons. They ostensibly ran an argument saying that they wanted the UK Parliament to be able to take back control. That sits uncomfortably with the near hysteria that you see coming out from the media waves from the Dominic Raabs, the Ian Duncan Smiths and the rest, who, when they see Parliament is taking back control of this process and saying there is no majority here or indeed in the country for the no-deal Brexit that you are articulating. The truth is that they ran their campaign based on a deception, and that deception was they cloaked their arguments with sovereignty and anti-migration fear in order to get smuggled through their real destination. Their real destination was to try and envisage a Singapore on the northeast Atlantic, a state which has very low rates of taxation, very low rates of regulation, and very low rates of social protection. If you go to Singapore, the taxation rates are much lower than they are here, but they have no old age pension, they have no health service, they have very little social housing to speak of. They know that if they had put that option to the British public, they would never have got the public's consent for it because there is no majority for it in the country. They want to see a bonfire of workers' rights, environmental rights, consumer protection, because they see it as red tape holding back the British lion, as mop-head Boris Johnson would tell us. Interestingly, for those of you who, like me, have occasional bouts of insomnia or wake up early in the morning listening to farming today, I heard Owen Paterson, one of the acolytes and outriders of the Brexiteers, saying that he'd been over to Oklahoma, apparently to try and forge some trade deal with the state of Oklahoma. Never mind the fact you can't do that. I mean, it's a national issue in the US, as indeed it was with the whole of the EU. But saying, yeah, we talked about environmental standards, and we talked about consumer protection. And my view is, what have the British public got to be concerned on about about chlorinated chicken? What's the issue about GM modified food? I mean, the truth is, Owen, if you'd really been levelled with the British public, we've had those kind of things on the side of a bus rather than the nonsense that you did have about pretending that there was going to be a Brexit dividend. And the reason they didn't was because they knew that there is no consent for it. A short word about people in my party, the so-called Lexiteers. I say to them, those of you who have concerns about an ability to renationalise parts of the railways or telecommunications or other services, when I sit on state-run German trains or state-run French trains, I come to the pretty much conclusion that there is nothing incompatible with being a member of the European Union and having a nationalised railway industry. You can have your debate about whether it's a good thing or not, but being in Europe is not a problem. I say to them, if you believe that removing ourselves from the EU is a battle you want to ally yourself with the hard right libertarians with, you must ask yourself why they are arguing for it. And the reason they want it is not to deliver the kind of society that people on the left of the Labour Party want. It is to remove social protection, it is to remove the Human Rights Act, it is to remove all of the things that we've spent so long on the left trying to introduce as ways of social protection. It is a fool's errand to ally yourself with the hard right. Do not let yourself be taken in by it. We have moved closer to a people's vote. I think at the moment we know that the battle is in Parliament. It's the most turbulent time in Parliament, and you are seeing alliances across parties forming in a way that probably nobody would have predicted even 6 months ago. And the reason for that is because the world view that is being propagated by the European Reform Group does not have consensus within Parliament as a whole, and probably not even within the Conservative Party in Parliament. But they have to an extent hijacked the agenda and are holding Theresa May to ransom, although it's interesting to see not as effectively as they thought they were going to do. They want us to trust the country, the country's future with them, but they can't even count to 48. So I would say to you this, that there is clearly a majority in Parliament against no deal, and that is to be welcomed. But do not be too assuaged by the current votes, because the reality is that the default option is no deal, crashing out, and if we cannot coalesce a majority in Parliament for some form of alternative, whether that's a people's vote, whether it's the EA, whether it's EFTA or whatever, the ERG will get their wish. And all they need to do is to ensure that there is no majority in favour of an alternative. But I say, if we can get a people's vote, and in reality the democratic way in which there was a referendum result on the previous vote means that it would be very difficult democratically to remain within the European Union without a second people's vote of some kind. We need to implore Parliament not to put on any referendum question a no-deal option. Because if you do that, the current polling evidence shows that large swathes of the population out there at the moment think that no deal means no change. They do not appreciate that we are in a roller coaster ride which is going to take us off the cliff if we go on a no deal option. And there are a lot of people out there who would vote no deal not properly understanding what it means. The polling evidence shows that that is the case. A responsible government does not hand the population a gun which is loaded with real bullets to play Russian roulette when a large swathe of the population thinks those bullets are blank. It would be an act of irresponsibility on behalf of Parliament, and I do not think it would be a discharge of their duty to protect the national interest. So I would have no difficulty with Theresa May's deal being on the ballot alongside a vote for a Remain option. But I think at the moment we would lose that vote. And I say that for a whole variety of reasons. First of all, there will be a lot of Brendas from Bristol out there who say, oh, not another one, if there is a second referendum. And it will be even worse than a general election because the public will be angry. Large swathes of the public will be have their fears stoked by the right-wing Brexiteer press and those who are demagogues, because they will be saying this is an attempt by the EU to overwhelm the will of the public, all the lines that you will have been hearing in the press recently. So the public will also be angry because this is a really difficult, complex argument. Frankly, I now know way more about the rules of origin, the difference between a customs union and a single market, about the sanitary and phytosanitary rules of transport from the port of Liverpool to the port of Belfast than I ever thought I would need to know, and probably that it's good for my own personal mental health. However, we would be effectively going out to the public saying, please engage with us in a nice discussion about this for the next 6 months. So do not expect a people's vote to be welcomed with open arms by the kind of people who don't give up a wet evening to come and discuss these issues in a fabulous restaurant. So we would need also to find a line of discussion with the Leave voting public which resonates. Despite the fact that many of you and many of me feel angry with people who voted Leave for a variety of reasons, some because we think they voted for racist reasons, some we think they voted for selfish reasons, some we think they voted for ignorance, I would employ everybody in this room to love a Leaver. We need to embrace them to win their votes over. The lines that will not win anybody's mind are, you were stupid last time you voted, you were racist last time you voted. We need to find my job, one of my jobs anyway, is as a barrister, and finding the line of, as described when I was being taught, is finding the easiest route home to get someone to conclude what you would like them to agree with. So I would say the line is to tell people you were lied to in the original referendum, and you know what? I didn't realise the depth of some of those lies, and I was taken in by some of those lies. It's only now that we have seen the truth partly revealed. We say to them, last time you voted on whether you wanted mythical Brexit, shining Brexit on a hill, the Brexit where we all had gold taps. Do you know what? The Brexit where the German car makers were going to force the EU to come on bended knee to the UK, and in which we could have our cake and eat it and still have it afterwards for a fabulous reception. So after 2 years of running up against reality, you now have not fantasy Brexit, but real Brexit. So we're saying to you, you're being asked a different question. Do you want real Brexit? Do you want the Brexit of a pit, not the Brexit of a shining city on a hill? And giving them the opportunity to say, do you know what, you're right, I was asked a different question last time, gives them the justification to say, I'm going to make a different decision. Not everybody will take that route, but we must not round on individuals who voted Leave last time. They are the people we need to win over. And we will have in our camp people who we didn't expect to have, people who voted and articulated for Brexit last time, who loathe Theresa May's deal so much that they regard staying in as better than Theresa May's deal for a variety of reasons. And we must, particularly if those people are hardcore Brexiteers in the last election, embrace them and say, well, we want you to articulate those arguments to people who won't listen to people like me, but will listen to you on the previous occasion. And we need to tell people last time round, the funding for the Brexit campaign didn't come from the general public in the main. It came from a relatively small number of very wealthy hedge fund owners whose own personal interests would be enhanced by a hard Brexit. Some of it looks pretty much like, came from the Kremlin, and a lot of the social media activity undoubtedly was prompted from the hard right in America and some of the Kremlin troll farms in St. Petersburg. We have an opportunity there to say you were deceived, and you were deceived on purpose because those people will be personally better off, or because certain institutions want to see a break-up of international cooperative institutions like the EU because they are the only effective vehicles for challenging their behaviour. So I say we need to find an emotional connection with the public, and we need to say to them, first of all, so-called world trade rules, do you know what? The hard right of the Tory party who tell us that World Trade Organization terms hold no fear for us don't tell you that at the same time at the moment Donald Trump is threatening to leave the WTO, and he is currently fouling up the appeal process of the WTO by blocking appointments to the appellate structure. It will fail to be able to resolve any disputes in about the next 12 months because the natural expiration of the appeal judges means that there will no longer be a quorum of the court of arbitration in the WTO. Make no bones about this. What he wants to see is the same kind of world that Vladimir Putin does, which is a world of might is right, and let's be honest, white might is right the way across the world. And the only way in which they can butt up or push back against the supranational organisations that introduce the rule of law, equity, and the other ways of making decisions other than brute force is to try and undermine those institutions and destroy them. Amongst them, of course, in the United Nations and the WTO, but more locally, our European Union. And we cannot face the challenges of the next decade without a supranational or institutions. How are we going to challenge climate change, an existential threat to everybody in this room, if we are going to rely upon Donald Trump and his nihilistic view of the world to save us? We are doomed. We must rely on organisations like the EU that do have international clout, can form trade deals with other organisations and countries, and use their negotiating heft to lever in climate change regulation and policy measures. How else are we going to ensure that our economy will be better if we leave the EU? And I say to individuals here who have children and grandchildren, how you need to make that argument to leavers to say, even if you yourself think, I can look back on nostalgically a perfect world when in the 1950s or 60s or whatever, don't vote just for your own self-interest. Vote for a better world for your children. And I think that if we can connect an aspirational hope, put a message of hope, and say to people, peace doesn't happen automatically, and those who told you it was unconnected with the EU, you look at the tinderbox that's gradually being stoked up in Northern Ireland, that we in this country have lived with for decades. Those who think that peace comes naturally, you are wrong. The European Union is the longest running, most successful peace process in the world. Not my words, but the words of the former leader of the Social Democratic and Labour Party, John Hume, from Northern Ireland. And he said it because it was true and because it wasn't academic for people in Northern Ireland. It was their lived daily experience. So I do remain optimistic that we can win that vote, but we must not repeat the dry economic arguments that we lost on last time. We must connect with people emotionally, and we must love a leaver. Thank you.